that I'd sent my regrets and that I continued to be a member of the committee. Not my intent to have it represented that way. I want to take the opportunity to clarify with council that I had asked the mayor, or had indicated to the mayor that I intended to step down. And subsequently, I've heard that Councillor Werdelin, who does not actually have the opportunity to chair any of the other committees in Saanich, had offered to step in my place. So obviously, the standing committee is appointed by the mayor, and it's his prerogative to appoint councillors. My intent this evening was to confirm that I have stepped down, and I hoped that perhaps council would either express a desire or make a recommendation to the mayor that Councillor Werdelin would step in my place.
Any discussion before I weigh in myself? Okay. All right. So, indeed, this meeting did take place, and why things have transpired the way they have, because I think it was a little bit odd that I had received a resignation from a member of council to a standing committee that the mayor appoints. It's typical for the mayor to appoint members to these committees and for the mayor to rescind the appointments. What I had expected, I think we're dealing with some of the things that I think are best done in conversation, but I think that perhaps gone beyond conversation. That's why they're here. But I think when the topic of membership of a committee comes up, I think the better course of action, if I can say this with respect, Councilor Murdoch, would be to ask for a meeting or to simply bring me up and express this interest rather than to send in a formal letter of resignation when it's not typically the practice. When I looked at that and when I thought about how this was done and your reasons for wanting to step off the committee because you were busy and you have other responsibilities on the Environmental and Natural Areas Committee, which might meet 12 times a year versus the Finance Committee, which might meet a minimum of 4 times a year. At the time that I felt that it was more of a responsibility for council members to respond to the mayor's appointment and to fulfill their mandate under the community charter. Under Section 115, not to get too pedantic about this, Section 115, responsibility of council members is to participate in council meetings, committee meetings, and meetings of other bodies to which the member is appointed. We are here on at the request of the public who have elected us. We are paid to be here, and while things may come up in our lives and we become busy and we're burdened by other committees and things like that, I did find it difficult that you simply sent a letter out of the blue simply asking for that you wanted to resign from the committee, where you actually said that you had resigned from the committee. So I think what I'd like to do at this point is like to essentially lift this from the agenda, and that we go back and we kind of restart the discussion, to have a proper discussion about committee membership, who would like to be on what committees, how we can accommodate everybody, and how we can deal with your request, and do that at a very highbrow level, if you will. That would be my suggestion about how we should deal with this.
Can I respond?
Sure, and for the record, I haven't heard directly from Councilor Werdelin who would like to sit on this committee. I have heard it indirectly from 2 councillors, and I think that's something that I would definitely consider.
Okay. Well, I respect that you'd like to have a discussion about it. I had understood that was what we did on June 29th. However, if that's not the case, the discussion can certainly be with respect to membership of the committee. But I think 4 months ago I made it clear that I don't intend to continue to serve on the committee, and I have had no reason to change my mind since that. So that part of the discussion in my mind is closed. If it requires a motion of council to recognize that I've done that, then I'm quite happy to make that motion. But otherwise I'm quite happy to participate in a discussion about appointments to committees.
If I'm speaking, I would very much like to do that, because the difficulty with the resignation is that it simply comes out of the blue as a letter, not as a request, but just simply, I'm resigning from this committee, and it leaves me in a position of, what do I do to fill that position right away? It simply came out as a resignation. It didn't give me the opportunity to have any discussion with any of the council members on how to best fill that position. And sometimes time is needed for that. I can't simply say, I'm going to appoint this councilman, because I have to have a discussion about what their availability is. And while we're all trying to do our best for the public, I could set up a number of committees and just make a number of assignments, and those committees aren't going to be successful. So having taken on that responsibility at the beginning, it does create a responsibility on your part to give me the opportunity and to find commonality and find someone else to consider, whether that be a member of the public or whether that be another councilman, as standing committees can be done. So I'd be quite happy to take this back and that we sit down and have a strong, positive, and constructive discussion about this to figure out just how to get forward on this. I'm certainly not going to stand on the charter on this forever, because I figure that it's a weak document and councils do not function properly if we simply work to rule by the letter of the law. We have to have some agreement and use common sense and be able to operate properly and move things forward. Councilor Workman.
Thank you very much. I never realized it was so difficult to step down from a committee, and I find it unfortunate that we have this discussion here tonight, and what the mayor has suggested makes good sense. But why wasn't this good sense put in place before? That does concern me. And as far as putting my name forward, I did contact the mayor at the first of the month. I texted him and said I would be interested in serving, and that's where it was. And I would be, but I realized too, it's up to the mayor to, on a standing committee, to decide who he'd like to see on that committee, and that's fine with me. But I'm just sort of dumbfounded that it's here tonight, but it is. And as the public, you can see what goes on sometimes on one-to-one when it doesn't come forward like this. But this isn't a place for it. Thank you.
Councilor German.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only became aware of this when I picked up the package and saw it was in there. Certainly it is the prerogative of the mayor to appoint standing committees, I think as you have done, but I don't think there's anything in the charter that says a member must serve. I think the charter indicates you can appoint members who are willing. Just wanted to point out to the public that Councillor Murdoch has been on the committee for a lot of time. Councillor Murdoch, in addition to being a councillor and having a young family, also has a full-time daytime job. And the committee works in the day, during the day, which I understand could be very problematic. So I certainly understand Councillor Murdoch's position. I think he, as any member of this council, has the right to decline to serve on a committee if they so indicate. And I hope that we can find a solution quickly. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've never known it to be so difficult to get off a committee. I remember when I ran, my daughter was young, and I went into the mayor of the day, and I just said, it's going to be really important for me to serve as a councillor in Saanich, but you have to understand that I have child issues, I'm a single mom, and that I wouldn't be able to sit on certain committees because unless my daughter was at school, it would be an impossibility for me to always get a babysitter in. I think that it's true, we shouldn't be discussing this. I saw the letter and I heard Councillor Murdoch say that he talked to you in June, and so I guess it was a bit of a shock when he got the minutes. I think it is important to recognize that standing committees are appointed by the mayor. We usually do our committees in November, but I think this is unfortunate because I think we need to recognize that there are different workloads for different people. And Councillor Murdoch has served 6 years on this committee.
Any more discussion? Councillor Sanders.
Thank you. Just a few comments. I've served 10 years on this committee, and I've served 10 years on this committee because the time always kept changing, and there were other people that had other obligations that couldn't attend, so I guess I'm the good willing nurse that keeps coming. But it is a struggle because I know last term we met always at 3:30, and I had a real conflict of caring for my grandchild at that time. And so, you know, we don't want to preclude people that have full-time jobs from being able to become counselors when they can't come during the workday. And Councillor Murdoch has done an incredible job of coming to me. We used to meet at one point at 7:30 in the morning, some ungodly hour. I think that was when Wayne Hunter was on council and he did childcare. And then we accommodated Councillor Bryce with work and Councillor Murdoch before. We met at 4:30, I believe it was. So it's really difficult, and we don't want to, in the future, not get new young people or people that are working to come on to council because they can't meet those times. So I'm just saying, I think that when the time comes, a person is served well, and thank you for coming, but when you have other obligations, it makes it difficult. So I think, Councillor Murdoch would like to step back now after 6 years. Councillor Wiggling, you've been on the FAP committee many times when I've been there too as well. And he's willing to attend and be part of that committee in the future. So I think we have the solution here.
Councillor Bryce.
Since this has now come onto an agenda, Mr. Mayor, I think we need to sort of somehow dispatch it. And I would think that I would say I can appreciate the comments and the frustration, I guess, that Councillor Murdoch is expressing here. It may have been there was a lack of communication or something, and whatever it was that brought it to that, but I appreciate the fact it's here, and I think that it should be received, and that the issue be handed over to the mayor to make some determinations and report back to other members of council in the appropriate time.
So motion to receive. Okay, second. Councillor Murdoch seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, and we'll deal with that matter for the benefit of the public. All right, so now I need a motion to adjourn council and move to committee of the whole. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. All right. This is what I think we're all here for tonight, the Committee of the Whole meeting. So let me just introduce the process for the Committee of the Whole. The clerk will introduce the item, at which point I will give council an opportunity to ask questions of staff. Afterwards, I will invite the applicant up to the microphone to give a presentation. After that, I will invite members of the public up to speak in favor or against the application. You can give your name and your address, and then your comments. Limit your comments to 5 minutes. That would be appreciated. There's a timer that's up on the podium there. It starts off green, and then it goes yellow, and we've got, I think, 30 seconds to go. There's a minute. 30 seconds to go, and then it goes red. And if you can wrap up your comments by the time that it's gone red and the time has elapsed, that would be very much appreciated by the people that will follow. After that, if there are any outstanding questions, I may ask the applicant up to the microphone again, and then it will be turned over to council for a decision. So with that, I would like to ask the clerk to introduce the first item. Madam Clerk.
The first item is for 4007 and 4011 Rainbow Street, a request to remove 2 properties from the Environmental Development Permit Area Atlas. There's a report that's attached to the agenda from the Director of Planning, recommending council approve option 1 as outlined in the report, and will be discussed by staff.
Are there any questions from council members to staff? Seeing none, I will invite the applicant up to the microphone.
Your Worship, we have an introduction to the item of the staff report.
I apologize. Sorry. Please, Ms. Paula, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and the committee.
We can't hear you. Can't hear you. Not here.
Just bring it a little bit closer. I have this trouble all the time. It's not good for my back.
I'll try this again. Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and members of the community. This is a brief presentation to give you some context to the request before you this evening to remove 2 properties from the Environmental Development Permit Area. I can't see from here which ones. Probably be up on the screen. This photo is of Christmas Hill within the Christmas Hill Swan Lake Nature Sanctuary, which is in the environmental development permit area and located very close to these subject properties. This is a highly valued natural area of rare ecosystem in Saanich. In this location, you can see the meadow in the foreground. At this time of year, it appears grassy, and in the background is a rocky area with fewer trees, typical of the Garry Oak ecosystems in Saanich. The two properties in question are mapped as woodland polygon of the sensitive ecosystem inventory, shown in red on this map. Garry Oak ecosystems are the predominant type of woodland in Saanich. It is one of the top 3 rarest ecosystems in Canada and can be distinguished from the Douglas fir forest found in much of rural Saanich. These areas were mapped originally using air photos based on tree canopy cover. The environmental development permit area uses these polygons, or small mapped areas, to highlight the areas of remnant ecosystems where contiguous tree canopy connects areas that may also include fairly intact urban ecosystems, areas that have been mowed, areas with invasive species, and areas where understory has been removed. The tree canopy or rock outcrops create obvious areas to retain and hopefully restore in the future rather than completely develop. This map illustrates how little woodland there is left in Saanich. In red, you can see Christmas Hill, Mount Douglas, Francis King Park, and Observatory Hills. They stand out as the major concentrations remaining in Saanich. This is a close-up of Christmas Hill on a map produced by the provincial government. The area in green is what was believed to be Garry Oak ecosystem in 1800. The red area is what is left based on sensitive ecosystem mapping in 1997. This includes the subject properties. They resemble the fish hook below the Christmas Hill polygon, which is a large one in red. The subject properties are included in the associated statistic of 5% of remaining Garry Oak ecosystems in Saanich. The two properties are located in a woodland polygon that is part of what was once a larger Garry Oak ecosystem. The polygon boundary is fairly accurate, but could be fine-tuned on a property-by-property basis. There is also a corridor of Garry Oak trees outside of the EPA that are protected by covenant, stretching along the northeast of the property up to Norththorpe Road. By entertaining the idea of removing properties based on current management of understory, there are several values which are not being accounted for. I would like to show what some of the values are by having a look at the rest of the polygon. The letters in blue correspond to the following photos, beginning with A. This area was analyzed by prominent botanists in 2007. No rare plants were located, and the sensitive ecosystem woodland polygon was considered seriously compromised. The recommendation, however, was to retain as much of the Garry Oak Grove as possible and to consider restoration and then maintain connectivity with surrounding oaks. These recommendations were followed, and development was approved by Saanich Council that recognized the Garry Oak Grove, and a bond was retained for future restoration purposes. The botanists were impressed with the exceptionally large Garry Oak trees and felt that since all Garry Oak ecosystems are rare, the area is worthy of conservation. The photo on the top right shows, or left, sorry, shows a retention area within a new development adjacent to the property. And this is the area that will be restored. The same botanist recommended restoration of this area, which is now Saanich Park. This is where the botanists found the best remnants of Garry Oak ecosystem vegetation of the Garry Oak Indian Plum Snowberry Plant Association. This park will also be restored when the adjacent development proceeds. It should be noted that restoration does not mean a return to pre-European conditions or even when Garry Oak ecosystems were managed by First Nations. We live in an urban environment, and this will always have an influence on restoration goals and outcomes. Area C This is, it also has invasive species like all ecosystems in Saanich, as well as native shrubs and Garryoak canopy. Restoration efforts to control invasive species do occur at this property. Moving up to Nelthorpe Road, this is the polygon that connects the subject polygon to Christmas Hill. It has thinner soils and includes a rock outcrop. There are invasive species located here too, but there's also an abundance of bird life attracted to the native wildflowers, flowering shrubs, and wildlife trees, like the decaying oak shown in the bottom left. A rare plant was recently discovered at this site. A biologist specializing in rare plants and terrestrial ecosystems has recommended this site for retention and restoration. To summarize, the values that go beyond property lines are things like restoration potential, bird habitat, contiguous canopy cover, and mature trees to connect rare ecosystems. On a final note, the recommended option 1 in the report to council, would allow for development similar to others on the street. In this sketch by the recently retired approving officer, 6 lots are achieved while conserving the rear of the property in the EDPA under the existing guidelines and exemptions of the EDPA. Without the EDPA, most of the trees would lose their protected tree status if subdivision occurred. Finally, without proper analysis, looks can be deceiving when a meadow has been mowed. This is why Garryoak canopy is the best indicator and the best placeholder of the rare Garryoak ecosystem for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Finish your presentation? Great, thank you so much for that. All right. So with that, I think it's time to call the applicant up to the microphone. No questions from staff on the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, Welland Council. My name is Anita Bull. I live at 4462 Wilkinson Road. I'm here to represent the applicants, Teresa Bijold of 4007 Rainbow Road and Norman and Helen Webb of 4011 Rainbow Road. Just one comment on that, those photos that were up there. I grew up in that neighborhood and I don't recognize those photos as bordering these properties. Anyways, I'll get on with my speech here. The applicants request their properties be removed from the EDPA as they do not have sensitive ecosystems on them. The applicants are not trying to develop their properties. The applicants are elderly. They intend to remain in their homes as long as they can. But given their ages, this could change overnight with them needing to move into a care facility. They intended that the sale of their homes would afford them residence in a care home. The EDPA has diminished the value of their properties and placed unwarranted restrictions on these properties, making them less desirable. The owners want their property values restored and clarity on their properties so that one day their properties can be sold with the same potential that other owners of properties without sensitive ecos would enjoy. For 2 years, the applicants have been trying to work with staff, but without success. Staff visited the 2 properties in December of 2013 and did not find any sensitive ecosystems on either property. Staff did find that the houses and patios were wrongly included in the EDPA. Staff committed to removing all the houses, decks, patios on all EDPA properties within Saanich from the EDPA. To date, this has never happened. Houses, decks, patios, paved driveways still remain in the EDPA. Staff advised the owners that if they wanted clarity on their properties, they would need to hire a registered professional biologist as per exemption 14 of the bylaw. However, staff recommended that the owners postpone hiring a biologist until a staff report went to council the following year recommending amendments to the bylaw. It appears that staff did not understand that these landowners are anxious to resolve the concerns on the properties as soon as possible in the event their care and financial needs suddenly change. The applicants hired a registered professional biologist and the report was submitted in November of 2014 stating there were no sensitive ecosystems on either property. It was requested both properties be removed from the environmental development permit area. Staff did not accept our biologist report advising that the municipal solicitor was of the opinion the lands contain Gary Oaks, which are an element of one of the inventories. Nowhere in the EDPA bylaw does it say the municipal staff or municipal solicitor or staff can challenge the report of the registered professional biologist and apply their own interpretation of the science. We questioned staff about this. Staff then replied that exemption 14 was intended for only minor refinements of the boundary. Nowhere in the bylaw does it say exemption 14 is only for minor refinements. We questioned staff about this. The response from staff was that exemption 14 was for properties in the development process. It just seemed the goalposts kept changing. The applicants from the start had been very clear in their discussion with staff that they were not planning to develop and that they just wanted their properties removed from the EDPA. If the properties had been in the development process, the owners could have relied on exemption 14 to have them removed from the EDPA. What difference does it make then that there is no development proposal on these properties? They are still mapping errors identified by the registered professional biologist. Nothing has changed. Staff's report to council on this application does not accept the consulting biologist report, giving the reason that the EDPA guidelines state that restoration to damaged or degraded ecosystems during development is one of the 3 objectives of bylaw. Ecosystems have not been damaged or degraded on these properties, as any sensitive ecosystems don't exist. The guideline also states that restoration is only required if the damage or degradation occurs during development. There is no development planned on these 2 properties. The staff report clearly admits staff is not following provincial mapping standards. Staff interprets that council intended to protect sensitive ecosystems regardless of their condition. The bylaw guidance document clearly states in more than one place that provincial mapping standards are to be used. Why is staff not following provincial mapping standards? How can the applicants be assured that they are being treated fairly when staff have applied standards different than anywhere else in the province? The staff report quotes another biologist. If provincial standards were used, 99.2% of the properties or the sites in the EDPA would not be classified as sensitive ecosystems. Clearly, these 2 properties and many other EDPA properties are mapping errors. There is no balance between the objective of the bylaw and these mapping errors. What is to be achieved by keeping them in the EDPA? Section 919.1 of the Local Government Act states an official community plan may designate development permit areas for the protection of the natural environment, its ecosystem, and biological diversity. Does Saanich have legal authority to keep these 2 properties and others in the EDPA where no natural environment remains? Does Saanich have authority under the Local Government Act to require an unnatural environment to be restored to what was natural at some point in time? Staff does not recommend both properties be removed from the EDPA because it sets a precedent. Precedent has already been set on the Alberg property. There was no active development application on the Alberg property. I believe the only difference is that on the Alberg property, they were not required to make application to council as I'm doing here tonight. Proper process needs to be followed consistently so that everybody is treated fairly. I believe that when Saanich Council adopted the EDPA bylaw in 2012, they believed they were doing a good thing, protecting our sensitive ecosystems and other biodiversity. Council would have acted on the advice of staff when drafting and adopting the bylaw in 2012. We don't know if mayor and council at that time were provided with correct facts and figures. I believe if they were given the figure of 99.2% of the sites not meeting provincial standards for sensitive ecosystems, they never would have agreed to the bylaw. To date, the implementation of the bylaw has brought about many consequences that I believe council never intended. A great deal of resources have been spent by both staff and the affected landowners to no one's satisfaction. The Saanich continues to keep properties in the EDPA that do not meet provincial standards, and if Section 919 of the Local Government Act does not afford them the authority to do so, This could be very costly and a huge drain on our tax dollars. Instead of using our resources to fight litigation, our resources would be better spent protecting the existing sensitive ecosystems in our park. The applicants should not be made to wait any longer here. Each one of you has visited the 2 properties. The bylaw states the first objective is to protect the areas of highest biodiversity within Sandwich. Are these 2 properties one of those areas of highest biodiversity? In December 2013, staff advised the families that the process they needed to follow was to hire a registered professional biologist and then make application to council. The applicants followed this process and have been waiting for over a year now. The applicants should not be made to wait any longer just because a larger review of the bylaw is going on. The bylaw is as it is now. The process was identified and followed by the applicants. Process should not be delayed. The registered professional biologist has confirmed that these are mapping areas. They are just lawn and garden under trees like you saw when you all visited the properties. Precedent has already been set on the Alberg property. These applicants are 88 and 90 years of age, and they would like to see their land return to the same status it has had for the past 65 years, or prior to the EDPA bylaw. Mayor and council needs to act now and remove these 2 properties from the EDPA. Thank you.